I want to talk about award shows, but not in the way you might think. What up, internet? My last video was a big one. If you haven't seen it, I cover The Simpsons throughout its entire 32-year run so far. And like if you haven't checked it out, I'd appreciate it if you did. I'll put a link there. Or there. Or there. So because I just did a bigger video, I thought it'd be a good opportunity now to sort of just take an idea I've had partially written for a while and finish it up and finally talk about something that's been on my mind for a while. I want to take a look at the razzies and see how the faults in the most popular parody award show are not only a problem for that show, but for award shows in general. AKA, I'm going to use the razzies to shit on the Oscars. Let's do this. So, before I dive into this, I thought, in case, for whatever reason you're watching this video and you don't know what the razzies are, I should explain. The Golden Raspberry Awards, also known as the Razzies, is a yearly satire of award shows. They give awards to the worst films of the year instead of the best. They do this to satirize how Hollywood celebrates itself every year. The award show has been going on since the 80s, and their goal is to, and I quote, encourage well-known filmmakers and top-notch performers to own their bad. And this quote is important. They're not giving awards to stuff like Birdemic, low-quality amateur movies made outside of the system. This is for specifically Hollywood filmmakers and actors working inside the system. So why do I want to talk about this? Partially because it's just on my mind, but I find it interesting that the Razzies and the Oscars, their flip side in the industry, share the same problem, which is getting things wrong. And I don't mean in the abstract way where I think Black Swan should have won Best Picture over The King's Speech. I'm talking more in the actual look at it way that things are wrong, like Driving Miss Daisy winning Best Picture in a year where Do the Right Thing wasn't even nominated. And seriously, the only time I've ever heard Driving Miss Daisy brought up is to make that point. But anyways, this video isn't about the Academy Awards. It's about their satire. I want to look at that because the Razzies, unlike the Oscars, they can hide behind the veneer of satire. No one discusses them in the same way they discuss the Oscars because it's not a serious award show. Now, there's a lot of ways to go about doing this. The easiest would probably to just point out how the cult classic bad film The Room wasn't nominated the year it came out. But that's pretty false. The Room was not the cultural juggernaut that it is now back in 2003. It built that up over time. And like I said, the Razzies aren't there to find the worst films made that year. It's to make fun of Hollywood. So of course, it's not going to win an award that year. Going after indie flops and homemade trash films wouldn't feel the same, and it would honestly probably lessen the appeal of the awards themselves. Was the worst film of 2006 Basic Instinct 2? No, my money's on Mr. Jingles. Don't make me talk about Mr. Jingles. I swear to God. The point I'm getting at is more about when they're just wrong. Like when they nominated Stanley Kubrick's The Shining for Worst Picture. Yes, that Stanley Kubrick. Yes, that The Shining. And that was in the first year that the Razzies ran. Don't worry, it lost to Xanadu. Now I will say there is ground to talk about how The Shining could be the worst film of the year. The way that Kubrick treated Shelley Duvall on set, who herself was wrongly nominated for Worst Actress for some reason, the way he treated her on set was terrible. That's well documented now, it's known. But it wasn't known in the same way that it was back then. You know, it wasn't talked about as much. They kind of silenced her voice in a lot of ways when complaining about that and made it out to seem like she was being overdramatic. But regardless of that, that's not why they nominated The Shining for Worst Picture. They did it because they didn't think it was a good movie back then, despite the fact that it is, of course, an artistic masterpiece no matter how shitty the director was as a person. So the reason I started thinking more seriously about this as a video topic, what got the ball rolling on the script and whatnot, is the fact that the most recent Razzie Awards nominees came out, and I saw a lot of talk on Twitter. Specifically, the talk was about Ben Affleck being nominated for Worst Supporting Actor for The Last Duel, and people being upset about it. Now, I haven't seen The Last Duel, so I can't really talk about the quality of the performance itself, though by the time I'm editing this, if I have seen it, I'm going to put my thoughts on screen now. But I do find this interesting because of the internet's weird perception of this film. The Last Duel was fairly well reviewed by critics. The Last Duel was fairly well reviewed by critics, and it has a small but fairly vocal fan base who are fans of it. But it did not do well at the box office. This led to director Ridley Scott to think it was a good idea to do an interview where he shits on millennials, I'm sorry, the millennium, for the box office failure of the film. And I think that's sort of where this is stemming from. Also, that's a whole ass thing in and of itself, and I'm not going to cover that. I'm going to assume you just know what that is. What I'm getting at is that interview was a turning point for the film and sort of started pushing it into meme territory. I'm honestly really surprised that Ridley Scott didn't get a nomination of his own for the film, but I think that might just be because his legacy in Hollywood is a little more well respected than Ben Affleck's is. Though Affleck was the first winner of the Razzie Redeemer Award, specifically designed to celebrate actors who have turned their careers around. But anyways, I think it just comes down to the fact that as far as this movie goes, Ben Affleck is the low-hanging fruit of the whole thing, because his career has been a mixed bag. That's not news here, Ben. Can I call you Ben? You're not watching this. Nobody's watching this. This is a bad joke. Ben has been a Razzie nominee before. His character looks like this. From what I hear, his performance in the movie is pretty good. People are arguing that's the best performance he's given. But out of context, I can see how people would say that this performance looks bad. I'm not surprised he got nominated. I am curious if voters voted that because they didn't like his performance in the film, or if they're not a fan of him as a person, or even if they just thought that they could spark the controversy that'll get people talking about the awards. That happened. I also wonder if part of that comes to the bias of what the voters have or haven't seen. Because bringing it back to the Oscars, oftentimes movies don't get nominated, or actors like Toni Collette in Hereditary don't get nominated because that's not the kind of movie that the people voting for it are going to go see. All that said, I don't think that this award show is ending the greatness that is the movies, and Hollywood is ruined because of it, blah blah blah. This isn't that kind of video. The movie industry is going to keep being exactly what it is. Benny Boy's career is going to be just fine. Same thing for someone like Keanu Reeves, who has had 8 Razzie nominations over his career and is currently probably in the best era of it, where he is more beloved than he's ever been before. That said, I'm sure this kind of stuff feeds into the sort of like memification of actors and their careers and boiling them down to just certain things. I wonder if I should do a video on like meme culture in its relationship to actors. You know, we could go over Keanu and Ben Affleck. Ooh, and I could talk about how I unironically like Nicolas Cage. Let me know if you want this in the comments. So we've talked about how award shows don't always have the right perspective, and how I think that it comes down to voters not always having seen what is the best film or performance of that year, or worst in the case of something like the Razzies. But there's one thing that we can take from this, one important fact, and that is for someone who doesn't give a shit about award shows and says it constantly in his personal life, I spend way too much time thinking about it. Cool? Anyways, that's my thoughts on award shows that I've had rumbling in my head for a while. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. Also, what's the biggest mistake you think the Oscars have ever made? That could be fun. Thank you to everyone who's checked out my Simpsons video. I'll have it linked here if you haven't yet, as well as another piece of work that I've done recently. And until next time, have a good one.